up going to Sunday school and church every Sunday without fail to a church just a few blocks from my home. And I loved my Sunday school classes, especially Mrs. Newman's class, where I was in when I was 4 and 5 years old. Part of what I loved about Mrs. Newman was that she told the Bible stories so dramatically, sometimes acting them out, sometimes using the flannel board. How many people remember flannel board? Annie, I knew it. I see you. But often she would simply read them with that wonderful energy that made them come alive. Our gospel this morning is one I distinctly remember her telling us without any visuals, and it was one of my favorites because I thought it was about leopards, those big cats with spots. And I remember thinking, wow, Jesus healed 10 leopards. That's amazing. I wonder how they all got sick at the same time and why they were all along the road. I'm honestly not sure when I realized that the story wasn't about big cats, but instead about people who were suffering from a disease known as leprosy. But at some point I obviously did, and it was no longer one of my favorite gospels. I mean, healing was cool and all, but no big cats. The story is a short one and not necessarily so memorable. It's just 9 verses. But there's a lot happening in these few lines. Jesus enters a village where 10 lepers approach him, keeping their distance. Now, so that any kids or adults aren't confused about who lepers were, leprosy at the time was a general term for skin diseases of all kinds. And leprosy was dreaded because it was generally thought of as highly contagious and incurable. Some types were completely disfiguring, caused infections and death. And the book of Leviticus, the 3rd book of the Old Testament, spends 2 whole chapters teaching priests how to diagnose skin diseases, how to pronounce lepers ritually unclean, how to perform rites of purification should they be cured. And it has instructions for the lepers. The one who has the disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of their head hang loose, and they shall cover their lips and cry, unclean, unclean. They shall remain unclean as long as they have the disease and shall dwell alone in a habitation outside the camp. So to be clear, the people who call out to Jesus, the lepers, were completely cut off from their community because of rules both religious and societal. And that was part of what made leprosy so feared, not just for what it did to the body, but because of what it did to belonging, to being part of the community. You couldn't live with your family or be with your friends. You couldn't work. You couldn't even go to the synagogue for worship. You had to stay separate, and you had to call out, unclean, unclean, so that no one would come too close. Now, in this morning's story, the 10 cry out something slightly different to Jesus. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. We don't know how they knew who Jesus was or what exactly they expect. Perhaps some coins, some foods, perhaps healing, but they cry out for mercy. And Jesus sees them, hears them, and tells them to go and show yourselves to the priests. Now that might sound odd to us, but it is straight from those rules in Leviticus. When a person believed themselves to be healed of leprosy, a priest had to certify them as clean before they could rejoin the community. So off they go, and it's an interesting act of faith in itself, without question, because it is only as they walk that they are made clean. The sores disappear. Their skin is made smooth. And Luke tells us that one of the lepers sees what has happened and turns around and comes back to Jesus. And he doesn't just come back for a thank you like you might offer your great aunt for a birthday present, No, he comes back shouting, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," praising God at the top of his lungs. He throws himself at Jesus' feet and thanks him with his whole self, body and soul. And here's the part that the crowd gathered around Jesus who saw this would have found shocking. This man was a Samaritan. Now, if you were here a few weeks ago, we learned in the parable of the Good Samaritan that Jews and Samaritans hated each other. There is a long and complicated history behind why, but though they shared many of the same scriptures and ancestors, Jews and Samaritans drew very firm lines between us and them. And by Jesus' day, the two groups wanted nothing to do with each other. So it is the Samaritan of the group who does something different than the others, unexpected. And Jesus doesn't let it go unnoticed. Where are the other 9? Is it only this foreigner who recognizes the gift he's been given? And then Jesus says something strange to the Samaritan. "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." Wait, wasn't he already made well? Wasn't he already healed of this disease that made him separate from the rest of the community? Well, the word that Jesus uses here, sasokin, does mean healed or made well, but it's much more expansive than a simple physical healing. He has been made whole, body, mind, and spirit, not because of anything Jesus did differently for him, but because he saw and he responded, and he is now transformed in a way that is deeper than just being healed of this disease. Now, the other 9 didn't do anything wrong. Heck, they did exactly what Jesus told them to do. We assume they went and showed themselves to the priest exactly what was necessary, what the religious law expected of them. And then, I expect, they went back to their lives. They returned to spouses, children, jobs. I'm sure they were grateful for being cured, giddy even. And in time, perhaps they too embraced the gratitude and the change of life that leads to true wholeness. But in this moment, Jesus points out, they missed out on something. They missed out on this moment, on the transformation that the Samaritan received. The Reverend Barbara Brown Taylor writes that all 10 behaved like good lepers, good Jews, but one, the Samaritan, behaved like a man in love. I love that, because I think perhaps that's what this story is about on a deeper level. It's not just about gratitude or obedience or even healing, but love of God. The Samaritan is so overcome by what has happened that he forgets what is expected and turns around. He comes back. He praises God with a loud voice and throws himself at Jesus' feet, not because he has to, but because he couldn't help it, because he is overwhelmed by what he has been given. The Reverend Taylor wonders about that 10th leper in a sermon. She writes, "I read my Bible, I say my prayers, I pay my pledge, and there is nothing wrong with that, nothing at all. It is that kind of steady, law-abiding discipleship, the discipleship of the 9 lepers that has kept the great ship of the church afloat for thousands of years. But it is the 10th leper who interests me, the outsider. He is the one who captures my imagination, the one whose disease I fear, whose passion confounds me, whom I may not see at all because he does not need a priest to certify his cure. Where are the 9, Jesus asks. But I know where they are. Where is the 10th leper? That's what I want to know. Where is the one who followed his heart instead of his instructions, who accepted his life as a gift and gave it back again, whose thanksgiving rose up from somewhere so deep inside of him that it turned him around, changed his direction, led him to Jesus, made him well. Where is the disorderly one who failed to go around with the crowd? The impulsive one who fell on his face in the dirt, the fanatical one who loved God so much that obedience was beside the point. I love that. I love the idea that perhaps we in the church have become so good at doing the right thing that sometimes we forget to look for the leper or to be the leper. And so I invite you this week to wonder about where the 10th leper is in your life, in our lives, how we might be him or her, because maybe this story, short as it is, isn't just about being obedient or about being healed or about being grateful. It's about being crazy in love with God. In the name of the one who loves us and has given us life. Amen.